Um, Welcome back to the deep dive. I have been looking forward to this conversation basically all week because, honestly, the stack of research we have today has completely rewired how I look out the window.
Yeah, it really does change your perspective.
It does. It's one of those topics that feels like, science fiction until you realize it is already written into the budget reports. But before we get into unraveling the fabric of the sky, I want to give a massive shout out to the platform hosting us for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
If you are listening right now, you are likely tuning in via Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf. We're absolutely thrilled to be streaming there.
We really are. And it feels like the perfect home for this discussion, doesn't it? I mean, Echoes from the Edge implies standing on a precipice, looking out at something vast and, well, maybe a little dangerous. And that is exactly what the source material is presenting to us today regarding the atmosphere.
It is. Usually when we talk about the weather, it's the ultimate safe topic. It's elevator talk.
Right, like, looks like rain. Exactly. Hot enough for you. It's passive. It's this thing that just happens to us. We endure it. We carry an umbrella. But the documents we've analyzed for this deep dive, specifically Architects of the Atmosphere and the Legal Analysis on Governance of the Skies, they flip that script completely.
They turn it upside down.
Yeah. We are looking at a fundamental transition from humanity just enduring the weather to a world where we monitor, model, and potentially, well, manipulate it.
Manipulate is probably the polite word. Engineer might be the more accurate one here. The central thesis across all these sources is that the atmosphere is no longer a wilderness. It's becoming a construction site.
A construction site. That is a heavy way to look at it.
But it's true. We are moving into an era where we are treating the sky less like a backdrop and more like a utility. Yeah. Which is the stated goal of our deep dive today, exploring this transition into the era of engineered weather. We've got a collection of texts analyzing atmospheric engineering, the governance of the skies, and the feedback loops of climate modification. And this requires some serious nuance, right? We are looking for the hard truths here, exploring that really narrow space between climate panic on one side and conspiracy on the other. We want to look at control and consequence.
Exactly. We have to look at this objectively.
Which leads to the question that hooked me immediately. It's a legal question, a philosophical one, and, frankly, a terrifying one. Who owns the sky?
It sounds like a riddle.
It does sound like a riddle, but think about it practically. Like if I buy a plot of land, I own the dirt. If I want to build a fence, I can.
Right, you have property rights.
Exactly.
No.
And if I divert a river on my property, lawyers get involved immediately because of water rights. We have centuries of litigation on who owns the ground and who owns the water. But the air, the clouds drifting over my house, it seems like a total free-for-all.
That is because, historically, the sky was considered res communis.
Res communis.
Yeah, it's a legal concept, meaning a common thing owned by everyone and no one. But that definition works only as long as we can't control it. Once you have the technology to reach up and squeeze rain out of a cloud, that common good argument just collapses. If you squeeze that cloud over your farm, you have essentially privatized that water. You have taken something that belonged to the natural system and made it an asset.
And we aren't talking about doing this in the year 2050. That was the biggest shock for me reading through Architects of the Atmosphere. I think the average person hears weather control and thinks of, I don't know, a villain in a Bond movie.
Or some distant sci-fi utopia.
Right. But the mission of this deep dive is to look at those hard truths. And the very first hard truth is this is already happening. I want you, the listener, to drop the idea that weather modification is purely futuristic.
We really need to dispel the science fiction myth immediately. Weather modification is not theoretical, it's bureaucratic.
It's infrastructure.
Weather is infrastructure. I actually highlighted that phrase in 3 different colors in my notes because it changes the whole paradigm. It is a profound shift in mindset. But let's look at the baseline reality. The sources detail cloud seeding operations that have been standard procedure for decades.
Decades.
Decades. This isn't a secret government black op hidden in a hollowed-out volcano. It is a line item in state budgets. It's handled by water districts and utility companies.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds, or the clouds, I guess, on this. How does cloud seeding actually work?
Yeah.
Because I have this mental image of a plane just dumping water buckets or maybe spraying a giant hose, which I know is completely wrong. The text mentions silver iodide. What is it doing up there?
It comes down to the physics of phase changes, and honestly, this is fascinating stuff. Clouds are often made of supercooled water vapor.
Supercooled.
Yeah, that means the water is below freezing temperature. So it might be -5 or -10 degrees Celsius, but it hasn't turned into ice yet.
Wait, how is water below freezing but not ice? That doesn't make sense.
It's because for water to freeze, it usually needs a structure, a nucleus to freeze around. It needs a speck of dust, a grain of pollen, or maybe a salt crystal. If the air is too clean, the water stays liquid even when it's freezing cold. It's just floating there, waiting for a catalyst.
So the water is basically ready to freeze. It just doesn't know how to start.
Exactly. It creates a state of suspended animation. And silver iodide is a chemical compound that has a crystalline structure almost identical to ice.
Oh, I see.
So when a plane flares the stuff into a cloud or a ground cannon shoots it up from a mountainside, those silver iodide particles act as a fake skeleton.
A fake skeleton for the water.
Right. The water vapor latches onto them, freezes instantly, grows heavy as an ice crystal, and falls as snow or rain. You are essentially hacking the phase change of water. You are introducing the instructions for the cloud to let go of its moisture.
Hacking the cloud. That is wild. And the scale of this, the sources list the United States, China, private contractors. It's not a fringe activity.
China is actually the heavyweight here. The source material highlights that they have a weather modification office that employs tens of thousands of people.
Tens of thousands for weather modification.
Yes. They used it famously before the Beijing Olympics to clear the sky. They basically forced the rain to fall before it hit the stadium so the opening ceremonies would be totally dry.
That's incredible.
But in the U.S., it's a bit different. It's more commercial. It's largely driven by the private sector and state water boards, especially in the western states.
That's where the weather as infrastructure concept really clicked for me. The text mentions ski resorts. Like, if you are a ski resort in Colorado and you have a bad start to the season, you don't just pray for snow anymore. You pay a contractor.
Right. You hire a company to seed the incoming storm, to squeeze out an extra 10 or 15% of snowpack. You are treating the storm like a delivery truck that you can just unload.
And it goes way beyond recreation, too. The western states view the snowpack in the Sierras and the Rockies as a reservoir. We build dams to hold liquid water. Now we are treating the sky as a pre-reservoir.
A pre-reservoir. That's a great way to put it.
If the models show a dry year coming, state agencies authorize seeding to bolster that snowpack. They are literally trying to bank water in the mountains.
Which sounds smart, right? It sounds responsible. I mean, if we are running out of water, why not squeeze the sponge? But this is where the nuance we talked about comes in. If you squeeze the sponge over Colorado, is there any water left for the plains of Kansas?
That feels like the inevitable conflict, the downwind effect. If you take the rain, someone else doesn't get it.
The science is still debated on the exact percentages, but the physics suggests conservation of mass. If you precipitate moisture out of a system here, that moisture is no longer in the system there. You are potentially stealing rain.
Rain theft. There's a legal term for the 21st century.
It hasn't been fully litigated yet, but you can bet it's coming. But here's the thing. Cloud seeding is just the minor leagues. It's local. It affects a county, maybe a watershed. The sources pivot in the second half to something much, much bigger.
Yeah, the leap in scale.
Exactly. They move from rainmaking to sun dimming.
This is the part where the hair actually stood up on the back of my neck. We were talking about solar radiation management, or SRM.
This is the leap from local weather modification to global climate engineering. Cloud seeding is tactical, SRM is strategic.
And the concept is, well, it's brutally simple in theory, but incredibly complex in execution. The Earth is getting too hot, so we put sunglasses on the planet.
In a way, yes. The mechanism is based on what we call global dimming, or more technically, managing the planetary albedo.
Albedo. Let's unpack that term for the listeners so we're all on the same page.
Albedo is just a measure of reflectivity. Snow has high albedo, meaning it reflects a lot of sunlight. Asphalt has low albedo, so it absorbs heat. The idea behind SRM is to increase the reflectivity of the atmosphere itself. And we actually know this works because nature has already done the experiment for us.
Volcanoes.
Exactly. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines in 1991, it was a massive event. It blasted millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere.
And that sulfur did what?
It formed a haze of aerosols that reflected sunlight back into space. Global temperatures actually dropped by about 0.5 degrees Celsius for over a year.
0.5 degree from one eruption. So the scientists are looking at that volcano and saying, can we build a machine that does that?
Precisely. The proposal is called stratospheric aerosol injection. You fly planes into the upper atmosphere way above where commercial jets fly, and you spray reflective particles.
Just continuously spraying them.
Right. Sulfur is the most common candidate because we know it works from the volcanic data, but they are also looking at things like calcium carbonate, maybe even engineered diamonds. The goal is to reflect just 1 or 2% of incoming sunlight.
And the sources say this isn't just a whiteboard theory anymore. This isn't just a what-if scenario.
No, not at all. The modeling is highly advanced. It is openly discussed in scientific journals. There is funding flowing into this from major billionaires and philanthropists. The source mentions that universities are already running the simulations on how to actually disperse these aerosol particles.
But why? That's the why we need to get to. I think it's easy to sit here and say, don't mess with nature. That sounds dangerous. But when you look at the data in Architects of the Atmosphere, the surging wildfire intensity, the longer drought cycles.
The inconsistent snowpacks. Heavy in some regions, totally absent in others.
Exactly. The argument is that we are approaching a tipping point where we might not have a choice. We've got atmospheric rivers dumping record rain in places like California while the Midwest just burns.
That is the temptation of control discussed in the text. We have to look at the context of why this is appealing. We are seeing what the text calls weather whiplash.
It creates a real sense of desperation.
Imagine you are the leader of a country that is literally burning down. Your crops are failing, your people are dying of heat stroke, and a scientist tells you for a few $1 billion, which is cheap for a government, by the way, roughly the cost of a subway line, we can lower the global temperature by 2 degrees.
Do you say no?
Exactly. Do you say no? It's the ultimate break glass in case of emergency button. It's incredibly seductive. You get to be the hero who turned down the heat.
But the pivotal question the text asks is whether this will be a last resort safeguard or just a normalized management tool. Because here is the problem with emergency buttons. Sometimes you press them and the alarm doesn't stop, or a completely different alarm goes off.
Or the button gets stuck.
Right. And that brings us to segment 3, systems theory. This is the section of the research that really requires us to put our thinking caps on, because it explains why intervening like this is so dangerous.
The source atmospheric intervention and the governance of chaos is vital here. It defines weather as a complex adaptive system, and the key word there is nonlinear.
Break that down for us. What does nonlinear actually mean in this context? Because I think people hear that and just think complicated.
It's more than complicated. In a linear system, if I push a box with 1 pound of source, it moves 1 foot. If I push with 2 pounds, it moves 2 feet. It's predictable. Input equals output.
Makes perfect sense.
But in a nonlinear system, a small push might do nothing at all, or it might cause the box to explode. The nonlinear nature of nature means small changes cascade into massive outcomes.
The butterfly effect.
Yes, but on a planetary scale. The rule is, intervene at one pressure point and another ruptures.
So if we fix one thing, what breaks? That's the question.
Exactly. Let's look at the hypothetical scenarios from the sources. Say you tweak the temperature in the northern hemisphere to save the ice caps. Great, you've achieved your local goal, but that temperature gradient between the pole and the equator is what drives the jet stream.
So if you cool the pole, you change the speed of the jet stream.
You alter its behavior entirely, and the jet stream determines where the storm paths go. It determines where the rain goes.
So the storms are predicted, maybe redirected. Where do they go instead?
That's the terrifying part.
Yeah.
You might save the Arctic ice, but in the process, you shift the monsoon season in India. Suddenly, 1 billion people who rely on that monsoon for their agriculture are facing famine. You save the ice, but you starve the tropics.
It's a global game of whack-a-mole. And we are intervening in a system we barely understand. We've got current feedback loops already happening. Warmer oceans fueling stronger storms, drier forests igniting faster.
Melting Arctic ice altering that very jet stream behavior we just talked about, causing those stalled weather patterns. The scariest part is that we might not know we've triggered that famine or that stalled storm until it's too late. The feedback loops aren't always instant. Intervention without full feedback understanding just amplifies risk.
And the sources suggest the danger isn't necessarily evil architects trying to ruin the world. It's the inherent unpredictability of the system.
Exactly.
But, and here's the twist that really messed with my head as I was reading.
Yeah.
The most uncomfortable truth from the source, the feedback loop of consequence. They introduce this concept of the illusion of natural.
This is a hard pill to swallow.
It really is. The key argument is that there is no untouched atmosphere anymore. We often fear hidden manipulation, like someone secretly spraying clouds. But the sources point to visible manipulation. We've already touched the sky.
We have. We like to think there is nature over here, pristine and holy, and humanity over there. But the atmosphere we are breathing right now, it's already engineered.
Unintentionally engineered, but engineered nonetheless.
Correct. Look at the visible hands, the text lists. Start with jet contrails. On a clear day, just look up. Those white lines aren't just smoke. They are artificial cirrus clouds. They trap heat.
I've seen days where the whole sky just glazes over from air traffic.
That is unintentional solar radiation management, but in reverse. It traps heat in instead of reflecting it out. Then look at industrial plumes. Look at our cities, Phoenix, Arizona, or New York City. These are massive urban heat islands.
Right. The concrete and asphalt absorb solar radiation all day and then radiate it at night.
The weather around a city is literally different. Because the city exists, we create rain shadows, we create heat domes.
And agriculture alters land reflectivity too. I grew up in the Midwest. We have what we call corn sweat.
Corn sweat, exactly. Evapotranspiration. When you plant millions of acres of a single crop, like corn or soy, you change the humidity levels of an entire region. We have altered the reflectivity of the planet by clearing forests to plant those crops.
Changing the thermal balance entirely.
We have changed the chemical composition of the air, the carbon cycles, the ocean chemistry. Industrial civilization is the experiment.
So the expert in the text is saying, when we see abnormal weather, like blizzards in Texas or avalanches on unstable snowpack, that is the feedback loop responding to this massive unintentional geoengineering.
Exactly. We are already geoengineers. We are just bad ones. We are doing it blind. We are doing it without a plan.
That is a deep insight from the text. The fear shouldn't just be manipulation. The deeper fear is consequence.
Consequence, yes. The argument for something like SRM is essentially, since we are already driving the car and messing up the climate, shouldn't we grab the steering wheel instead of letting it veer off the cliff?
Which brings us to the most difficult part of this entire deep dive, the governance gap. If we grab the wheel, whose hand is on it?
This is the crux of the issue. Democracy in the sky.
This is where the governance of the sky source gets really dark. If we are going to doom the sun, who decides? Is it the UN? Is it the U.S. president? Is it some billionaire with a god complex who buys a fleet of specialized planes?
Right now, it's a vacuum, a complete vacuum of oversight. The problem is most people cannot name a single federal program regulating atmospheric intervention.
Because the conversation is currently confined to academic journals, private grants, and technical agencies. It's not happening in town halls.
The text makes a really compelling analogy here about labeling. Think about how we handle other things that affect public health.
Right. The text points out that we demand labeling on food. I know exactly what's in my cereal because the FDA mandates it.
We regulate pharmaceuticals extensively. We audit our water systems to make sure they are safe.
But the sky.
The argument is that since the sky affects everyone, atmospheric intervention should require similar scrutiny. It should require public consent.
But how do you get informed consent from 8 billion people? If I don't like a medication, I don't take it. If I don't like the food at a restaurant, I just don't eat it. But if I don't like the weather modification you are doing over my state, I still have to breathe. I still have to live under that sky.
Exactly. You cannot opt out of the atmosphere. So it will likely be done by a coalition of the willing or even a single rogue actor. And that leads directly to the weaponization risk, which the sources issue a serious warning about.
Yeah, if the atmosphere becomes a tool, there is a massive risk. It becomes a weapon. And we aren't just talking about weather wars where we send hurricanes at our enemies. It's about economic and geopolitical warfare.
It's far subtler than hurricanes. Imagine you are a superpower. You don't need to bomb your rival. You just need to tweak the precipitation patterns so their wheat harvest fails 3 years in a row.
You starve their economy.
You starve their economy. You create social unrest. And the best part for the aggressor, plausible deniability.
They can just say, oh, it's just climate change. Bad luck.
Exactly. We didn't do it. The weather is just crazy these days. It turns the atmosphere into a geopolitical chessboard where the moves are completely invisible.
A new domain of conflict. Land, sea, air, space, and now weather. So we have a chaotic system, we have powerful technology, zero rules, and incredibly high stakes. how is the public handling this?
We aren't handling it well.
We are just screaming at each other.
The politics of a fractured sky analyzes this perfectly. The public conversation is entirely fractured. On one side, you have climate panic, people so terrified of warming they will accept any solution no matter how risky. They see SRM as the only lifeboat.
And then on the other side,
You have climate dismissal, or conspiracy versus compliance, people who think every cloud is a government plot to control them.
it feels like there is no middle ground. You either believe the government is spraying poison or you believe they're saints who would never touch the sky. And dismissing all weather intervention talk as delusion is intellectually lazy.
But claiming every storm is engineered is equally irresponsible. And the consequence of all this noise is that when nuance dies, oversight dies. If the sky becomes purely political, transparency vanishes entirely.
So the expert in the text urges the learner to practice nuance, to hold multiple truths at once, because the source explicitly states that multiple forces can be true at the same time.
Let's list those truths for the listener, because this is crucial for navigating the noise.
Yes, let's do that, because when I read this list, it finally felt like a grounded perspective. Truth 1, climate change is real.
Truth 2, weather modification technologies exist.
Truth 3, governments experiment and corporations lobby.
And truth 4, military research into atmospheric systems has a long history.
All of those things can be true at the same time. You don't have to pick a team. You can acknowledge that the climate is changing and that powerful people are exploring ways to hack that change.
Precisely. We need to look at the reality, which is boring, bureaucratic, and much more dangerous than the wild theories. It's about policy, it's about unintended consequences, and hubris.
Hubris. We are trying to engineer a system we barely understand. So let's summarize the key takeaways for the listener who is trying to process all this. We've covered a lot of ground today.
I would boil it down to this. First, weather modification is real and happening right now, like with cloud seeding.
Second, we are on the brink of much larger interventions, specifically solar radiation management.
Third, the system is chaotic and nonlinear, making control incredibly risky. Small inputs can have massive unintended consequences globally.
Fourth, we are already geoengineering the planet unintentionally through industrialization. The illusion of natural is just that, an illusion.
And finally, there is a massive governance gap, a complete lack of democratic oversight regarding the sky. We are building the engine before we've invented the brakes.
It's a sobering image. Before we sign off, I want to remind you that you are listening to this deep dive on Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf. It's rare to be able to go this deep into a topic without filters, and we appreciate the platform.
We really do.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, a closing question derived from architects of the atmosphere that I haven't been able to shake. Ownership of land is regulated. Ownership of water is litigated. But ownership of the sky, that conversation is just beginning.
And once we step fully into co-authoring the sky, can we ever step back?
Think about that the next time you look up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions.